So I guess, as Mark said, I'm a respiratory consultant, and I think we're, from an NIV point of view, we're sort of at the beginning of our journey. Our NC-POD report was relatively recently published, or only last year, so you can think of this as the baby steps from what you heard before, and hopefully one day we might sort of get there. So yeah, I've got no conflicts of interest. So just, I know that you're all nephrologists in the audience, and I know that those of you who are also non-clinicians. So just a tiny one slide about background. So NIV, non-invasive ventilation, what is that? It all started from the iron lung in the 1920s with polio and wards of people who couldn't breathe and they were all dying, and it was a way of supporting a patient's respiratory system and helping them to breathe. At that stage there wasn't endotracheal intubation, there is now. So our current NIV, which started from that middle slide, which looks a bit like something you might use to refuel your car, and actually if you look at the current guide, what our NIV machines look like now, it's not really that different, is it? There's still a tube, there's still a mask, and the point is there's a tube and a mask and the patient isn't being intubated invasively. It provides positive pressure in comparison to the iron lung, which was negative pressure, and through that providing a positive pressure through your facial interface, you can support the patient's breathing. And why is that important? So patients have acute type 2 respiratory failure, they can't breathe, they can't clear their carbon dioxide, and non-invasive ventilation helps them to do that. And there's lots of evidence now, we know, that it's very good at doing that. And actually these patients are really very sick and they come in and die, not in quite the same numbers as patients die with renal failure, or with renal failure, but there's still an awful lot of them. And actually if you do NIV well, from the earlier studies in the year 2000, Plant was the sort of first person to publish this on a big scale, you can really make a difference and you can reduce mortality by about 50%. So that's huge, giving a treatment like this, which can be done relatively easily, although I'm going to go on to tell you how it's not as easy as we think it is, actually can make a massive difference. So doing it well is really important. And when over the next few years that followed those initial studies, more and more people did it, everybody's on the bandwagon, and generally you can see that NIV is better than standard care, and in particular groups of patients, when done really well, you can improve mortality, you can stop them having to go to intensive care, and generally your outcomes are better. So, where have my words gone? Okay, so what's gone wrong then? What's happened between those studies when everything was brilliant, NIV was excellent, and what do we need to do differently now? So the problem with things that are brilliant and excellent, cheaper than intensive care and relatively easy to do, is that everybody thinks that they can do them as well. And that's what happened with NIV. The real world got in the way. We stopped selecting our patients in the same way, and we started to provide NIV in a much more general way. And then over the next few cycles of the BTS audit, rather than things improving with all our new guidelines, with all our increasing experience, with all our increasing equipment, actually things were getting worse, and obviously that's not the ideal. So after the audit for the third cycle showed that things were worse, significantly worse than we were expecting from the trials, they stopped doing the audit cycle, and that's where NC-POD came along, and developed the NC-POD study in response to the audit, as Mark said earlier, which was demonstrating that things were getting worse. And despite having several iterations of lots of guidelines, I think the BTS guidelines for NIV have been updated 4 or 5 times, and despite this, the audit is always getting worse. That's why the BTS and the NC-POD together came up with this particular review. And I was very lucky to be one of the reviewers with my wellies, I think was noticed earlier, mentioned earlier, wading through the paper notes. All I can say about that experience is it's much easier to wade through paper notes than it is to wade through electronic notes, which was a totally different and unexpected challenge. But anyway, I think I reviewed, I don't know, maybe 10 cases, and thankfully there were many other people, and it's set up in the same way as the other NC-POD studies are. They reviewed cases from all over the country, both individual patient cases and also the organisational structure. And what I'm going to use the rest of my time to talk about is how those findings from the NC-POD study, which I'm sure you've been through already, how they were then used to develop the BTS quality standards, and then how our little beginning of a QI project has used that to move things in our little local area forward, and what we hope to do in the future. But I think the headlines from that study were really that 8 out of 10 cases were less than well managed, were scored less than good. And really that's pretty shocking, I think, when you think about how much better we could be doing. And the highlights were, 8 out of 10 cases could have been done better. The mortality remained as high as in 2013, so still more than 1 in 3 patients. And I think what's particularly striking for me is that in 1/5 of all the cases who were put on NIV, the reviewers thought they should never have been started on NIV in the first place. So 20% of the time, we're giving the wrong treatment and we're giving it badly. And in that 20% of patients, 2/3 of those died. So actually that's significantly worse. So these patients are really sick when they come in, whoever they are, and we can make things significantly worse if we do the wrong thing. And as Mark said earlier, the NC-POD developed their QI tool to go alongside the report, and amongst their many recommendations, the 21st recommendation was that we should have a BTS quality standard, and the NC-POD tasked the BTS to produce these quality standards, which I was very loosely and very peripherally involved with. And here they are. So just, I think, a pause. What is the point of having a quality standard? Is it another guideline, another stick to sort of beat ourselves with? Well, yes is one answer. No. I think if you think along QI lines, which is what this talk is about and working together, I think you could think of these as process measures. These are things that if you as an organisation or a team providing a service can do, you should be then providing better care. So a quality standard isn't have less death from patients with NIV. The quality standard is provide better care. And if you do these 6 things, you should be a long way closer to achieving that. And that's how they've been designed and why they've been chosen as they are. And they've been chosen as they are from the results of the NC-POD study. So the second and third ones are about training and having competent staff and only delivering NIV in an area where those competent staff are working. And if you look at the results from the NC-POD study, you can see that actually less than 50% of hospitals have a designated area, have an area where those staff are competent to be delivering NIV care. And again, in more than 50% of hospitals, in more than 50% of hospitals, there are staff delivering NIV care who don't feel that they're competent. And I'll go on to show you that that's exactly the experience that we found at our trust as well. And then one of the 5th bit quality standard of these 6 is about escalation planning. So why is that important? So these, as I said before, these patients are very unwell. They come into hospital and they're highly likely to die. 1 in 3 of them are going to die. And yet, despite that, we don't make a plan for the event of treatment failure. And the reasons why we don't that are complex, and I certainly don't feel we've fully pitched out. I think if you ask anybody on the shop floor, should we make a plan, they all say absolutely yes. If you say to them, why should we make a plan, they all come out with the right answers, because you need to know what's going to happen when at 3 in the morning things go wrong. But despite the fact that they know that, they still don't do it. If it is reassuring though, if they do it, I think the reviewers generally agree they'd made the right plan, so that's the least reassuring. So we now have the BTS quality standards, we have the results of the NC-POD study, but what are we going to do with that? How are we going to sort of spread the word and make sure that actually people can use this productively to improve things? And we've all heard how difficult quality improvement can be and how it's difficult to get your executive team on board and make sure that they're helping you. So where I was sort of more centrally involved is developing this quality improvement tool published by the BTS for non-invasive ventilation. And the BTS this is their 2nd quality improvement tool, but they want to do more, and they divide them into 2 parts. The first is about principles of quality improvement that you guys I'm sure know way more about than I do, and the second is some specifics for NIV. So in previous talks that I've given, not to this sort of audience, I sort of always pause here and say, what is quality improvement? And again, I don't need to tell you guys what quality improvement is, but I think it's useful from my point of view just to reflect on it for a little bit. When I started this journey, it's got a bit of a QI term, so when I started this journey, I was a big quality improvement cynic. I was like, I'm not convinced by this, I don't need a PDSA cycle, I know what I'm doing, it would just help if everybody else just did what I said they should do. And I'm sure we all sort of recognise that a little bit, but I think it's important to realise why this works. It works because it's about bringing your stakeholders in, and it's what you were saying. You've got to have everybody who's involved, from your patients to your IT man to the porters, they've all got to feel involved to buy into the project. And that's really the only way you're going to actually achieve it. I certainly, as a registrar and then later again as a consultant, produced another nice NIV prescription chart, delivered it, said do it, nothing happened. But this time things have been a bit different, and it's because I've approached it in a different way. And obviously you can't talk about quality improvement without talking about PDSA cycles. So here's a picture of a PDSA cycle. I think one thing that particularly brought home to me how important this was is when I was looking for slides for a different talk, I found this on the Clark website, and it's had 100,000 downloads. Yeah. So why engage with quality improvement? From my point of view, I think it's just really important to reflect on the fact that it doesn't work if you do it on your own, but the quality improvement methodology, the tools, all bring together the whole team, and you just have to look at the King's Fund or your website and you'll see many, many examples to sort of inspire you to do it. Anyway, part 2 of the quality improvement tool is some specific things, again linked to what the NC Pod found, linked to the BTS quality standards, and we've just taken you sort of through how you might approach each of these points. And what it's done is bring together experience from our trusts and other trusts and just put a whole load of resources and experience in the same place. So for the last 2 minutes, which I think I might have, I'm going to tell you what we did at Imperial. So I think one of the other things I've learned is that you can't do quality improvement without a bit of support. It's amongst having a team, you also need time, and we were very lucky to have funding. So I applied to a grant from the Clark Northwest London, which is part of the NIHR, and they funded Vicky, who you can see here, for a year to just project manage this project. And really without her, we wouldn't have achieved nearly as much as we achieved. I can thank NC Pod for introducing me to Vicky, because we met as reviewers one rainy Tuesday afternoon, and then from there on she applied for the job and got the job, which was great. So that's one thing I think is important that I learned, is that you can't do it without proper buy-in and time. I think not all projects, you don't all need to have a full-time person, but what is again said over and over again is that we have to get our hospitals to buy into quality improvement and allow us time in our job plans, in our work stream to actually do this. The other thing I just think that I learned again during this project is the importance of involving patients. Again, if I think 2 years ago if you said to me, you need to have a patient rep in your meetings, I'd have said you can't bring up a sick COPD patient to it's not fair on them, what do they know really, we just have to help make them better. I think there's part of that's true. I certainly don't think you should bring somebody in just for the sake of your project to be able to say that you have a patient rep on your board or whatever. But I think that going out to patients is just invaluable, and their experience and what they can tell you is so much more than you might realise yourself. And at the beginning of our project, we did a lot of work with patients, asking them through a variety of different means and focus groups and structured interviews and things about their experience of NIV. And it just, this story makes some people laugh and other people cry, but we asked our patients what they thought about NIV, and almost universally they didn't like it, not that surprising. And they didn't like it because they didn't understand it. They didn't know why it was done, why or how it could help, and they, in retrospect, they didn't understand what had happened to them. They're very acutely unwell when they come in, and then to remembering that sort of terrifying time often made them anxious and made them not want to do it again, even if it had been successful. So they felt that they didn't understand it. And one of the other themes that came out is that they felt that we as staff didn't understand it. We couldn't consistently, as a group of medical professionals, provide a good explanation. We couldn't always give the same explanation, and they felt there were different standards of care given across different areas, and that made them then anxious about another level of things as well. And initially we thought that was a bit unfair, and maybe they were hard done by our staff, so we asked our staff, and they didn't understand it either. They freely admitted in an anonymous questionnaire that they felt that they didn't have the competency and training, and just as in the NC Pod report, a large number of them felt they didn't have the competency and experience to be dealing with these patients who they were left with overnight. And from that we got our aims for our project, which were to improve the outcomes and experience of NIV at Imperial through improving understanding of both the patients and the staff. I'm not going to tell you everything we did, but here we are having a great time doing QI. You can tell we're doing quality improvement because there are post-it notes. And this is just a very tiny corner of our pathway map. This is a driver diagram or an action and effect diagram, depending on whether you're clerk or not clerk. And it's just an example of complexity, which Mark's mentioned, you mentioned as well. This is not a simple process. If you try and oversimplify it, it's not going to work. You have to bring all that complexity, everybody else's agendas, everybody else's aims in together to try and get to a common aim and a common theme. And did it work? Well, it's working. This is my headline, that our patient responses have improved, positive responses have improved from 18%, which I think must have been quite generous at the beginning, to 54% now. And I think that's a massive step in the right direction. This is a nice P chart and shows just how we've been able to, with the introduction of a bundle, improve our documentation of the NIV parameter plan. It's an ongoing work in progress, and this is our dashboard that just shows how things get better and then often fall off a bit as well. But slowly, slowly, we're starting to make improvements. And slowly, slowly, we're starting to collaborate with other groups. So Bex is up there, Mark down here, and we're trying to collaborate and share our experience through the NIV quality improvement tool, but also through just working together, meeting up regularly to sort of all things, get everybody together. So in conclusion, I suppose the NC Pod review is what sort of started this, what drove it forward. It's what identified the clear aims, so the clear points which we need to aim to improve, and they were reflected in the BTS quality standards. The BTS quality improvement tool gives us a place to start, gives us some nice ideas, but it's only by collaborating and all working together that we're going to be able to actually make any difference. And I just highlight the fact that the next BTS audit is coming up any minute now, and maybe, just maybe, we might start to see an improvement. You never know. Thank you to everybody. That's Vicky again and my team, and most of the patient.